The lower gardens perform a really important function at Brantwood, and always did, because fundamentally they connect the house to the lake. And the lake was both an important utility but also a fantastic amenity in Ruskin's time. And so they all wanted to get down to the lake and to the harbour where they had their boats, and they wanted an elegant way to get down there. And it was Ruskin's cousin, Joan Severn, who created the harbour walk. The harbour walk is a pleasant, gentle gradient walk down to the harbour, from which it gets its name. And it's planted with these wonderful azaleas. And they are the original azaleas that Joan planted. And in the spring, they have the most fantastic scent and colour. And indeed, it's designed as a sort of garden of colour to take you down to the lake. So rumour has it that the path is, in fact, the exact width of Joan Severn's skirts. Of course, being a good Edwardian lady, she had these wonderful wide dresses and skirts. And you wouldn't want them to got soaked going down the grass or dusty in the earth, and so they're exactly the right width for her to make a gentle progress down to the water. Okay, now not looking its best at the moment, but absolutely wonderful in the spring, is Ruskin's daffodil meadow. Ruskin planted this meadow with wild daffodils in order to replicate the slopes of Vevey above Lake Geneva. Ruskin, of course, bought Brantwood as a sort of second home version of living in the Alps, and he wanted to be reminded of alpine scenery. He's got the mountains. He wanted the wild daffodils coming down to the shore, and so he planted this field, and it's been kept like that ever since. And we leave it wild throughout the year, but in the spring it has the wonderful wild daffodils. Although Coniston Water looks very peaceful, in fact, it gets very, very strong winds, and Brantwood actually faces west into the prevailing winds, and therefore the lakeshore here can get very, very wild, particularly in the winter. Consequently, if you want to have boats on this lake, you need somewhere safe for them to go, because if you drag them up on the shore, chances are that the winter storms are going to break them up. So Ruskin, one of the first projects that he had here was to build a decent harbour, and on this side of the lake, that meant digging right into the bedrock and creating what is absolutely magnificent structure. Now, Ruskin had the idea, but he also had the idea that it would be a good idea to get some of his Oxford students to come and actually build it for him. So in order that they should perfect both body and mind simultaneously, he actually invited them not only to come and help dig out the harbour, but while they dug it out, he read Xenophon's Economist to them in the Greek. And it was their job in the afternoon, when they were resting their sore backs and shoulders, to sit and translate the Economist into English. Ruskin then published it. I have to say, he published it in his own name, not in the name of his students who'd done all the work. And this is known as Ruskin's Harbour, but the people who actually built it, of course, were his students and some of the local tradesmen who basically came and helped put it together when it wasn't quite right. So it's a magnificent structure. The only thing about it is that because it faces west, the waves gradually build the bank up on the side of it, and during the winter storms they pour gravel and stuff into the harbour. So you can hear a tractor in the background. That's because Dave, the estate manager, is busy digging out the harbour while we've got some lower summer weather. So the trellis walk is named for reasonably obvious reasons after the trellises that are in it and go up towards the top of the garden and give the opportunity for plants to climb. The theme of this garden is actually the arts and crafts. It's the idea that nature is indeed an inspirational book for artists and architects and designers and makers of things, and that all the different forms that they need are to be found in nature. So, for instance, Ruskin was very interested in the capitals carved at the top of columns in places like Venice and in Gothic architecture in general. And here we have the acanthus leaf. The acanthus leaf was used a great deal as an inspiration in such columns. And when you take the leaf and you just curve it like this, you begin to see the shape of leaves that appear in the carvings at the top of Venetian capitals, and indeed capitals all over the world to this day. And if you look around in this garden, you can see, if you like, the designs of William Morris wallpapers, of Laura Ashley dresses from the 1960s and 70s. You can see all manner of inspirations for different designers and artists. And this is a sort of sketchbook of possibilities for people to come and study and enjoy. The inspiration of plants can, of course, be symbolic rather than necessarily just to do with their actual design. And Ruskin talks about the foxglove, for instance, when he's developing his ideas in the nature of Gothic. And one of the things that he says about the foxglove, that he likes about the foxglove, is the idea that the foxglove is, as it were, a plant of all the different stages of life. So it starts with these tiny little buds at the top, which are just the juveniles, the young, if you like, goes through its teenage years when they're just forming and beginning to show promise, but they then eventually blossom into the most beautiful and wonderful adult flowers. But that then gradually begins to turn towards older age. They quieten down, if you like. Eventually they come, this particular plant doesn't have any, but you will see they gradually get a little bit crinkly, bits start to fall off, and in event they come to the end of their life. And rather than doing this all at once, of doing it at different stages, they actually do it all at once. They have all the stages of life in the flower all together, if you like, the 7 ages of man. So the wonderful things about gardens, of course, is that they're dynamic and everything's constantly changing. What you see today will be different from what somebody saw a few weeks ago. There are always new surprises. And these surprises are, of course, orchestrated by our wonderful garden team. And Bethan, who's our head gardener, is much better qualified than I am to tell you about some of the amazing and beautiful flowers that there are in the border at the moment.
So here we are in the trellis walk. I think Howard's already told you a little bit about the arts and crafts inspiration for this herbaceous area. It is one of the more floriferous areas. It's great at the moment. It's a really hot day. The sound of bees and other insects is thrumming in the air, which is really, really nice. So we've got some things that are in full flower. We've got lots of foxgloves. They do self-seed, but we've got the occasional white and other shades of foxglove. Because at Brantwood, we don't necessarily weed things out if we think they're beautiful. So whereas other people might stick to a really strict plan, we do like to enjoy what wants to grow here to some extent. So you'll find a lot of foxgloves, and you will find we've got feverfew coming up as well. And I'm a particular fan of Welsh poppies, which we can see one up here as well. But then amongst all these delightful self-seeders, we've got geraniums, we've got these water avens, and this one's called lemon drops. So it just nods its head in a really dainty fashion, and then when the flower goes over and it goes into seed head, it's also quite a fun seed head. So you can see by the sort of the cluster. So it does look a little bit like some of its family when it's in seed, like buttercups. They have that similar sort of hooked seed capsule. Then we've got some other seeds here. The Honesty has gone into flower already. This has got a great name. It's a Silique. We've got various cultivars as well. So this is a McKenna hybrid of Aquilegia. And fantastic opium poppies up here, which are just lovely at the moment. They're really, really nice. A lot of people don't like them in the border because the foliage can leave a bit of a mess, but it's just, I think it's worth it for this spectacular show. And the buds are pretty fabulous looking as well. The Iris chrysographes, it's called Black Knight. And it's got this tiny little yellow mark in the middle of these really, really velvety purple black petals. It's absolutely lovely. And next to it, we've got a little geum This one's called album. So this was a water avens, like the lemon drops over there, but very, very pale.
This is the Hortus Inclusus. The Hortus Inclusus was created to honour Ruskin's interest in British native herbs. Ruskin was a great believer that the plants best adapted to live in any particular place were the natural traditional flowers of the area. And he wanted to use those and to harvest those for the benefit of people who lived in the area. So consequently, he studied a great deal the flowers of Cumbria. He wasn't alone in this. He had a very, very good friend who lived in the village, Susanna Beaver. And he and Susie swapped letters with one another about gardening topics all the time. Indeed, they wrote a book, in effect jointly, called the Hortus Inclusus. And this garden is named after that book. So Ruskin didn't create this garden. We created this garden in honour of Ruskin. And it sits between what I might call the cultivated garden that we've been in the trellis walk and the wild garden of the meadow, which is on the other side of it. And it's laid out in a very interesting fashion, a bit like a medieval herbal book. That is to say that the flowers or plants are all divided up according to their various uses on the one side of the garden and on their various aesthetics or forms on the other side of the garden. So I'm standing in an area of the garden where they are divided according to aesthetics. And so this, for instance, are plants for forms. So we're looking here at the structure of the plant. Ruskin was very interested in the leaf structure of a plant and what it told you about the life of that plant and what it needed. And gardeners need to look at these forms in order to better understand the way that the plant survives and what it needs for its survival. If we go down, there are plants with colour, there are plants for rhythm, and so on. So there are the different aspects of the aesthetic or the look of plants and the things that we can learn from them. And the other direction are the plants for utility, for our benefit. So, for instance, there are plants for dyeing different colours. There are plants that are for illnesses, for cosmetics, for veterinary use, and so forth. Surrounding these different interpretations of the plants are the borders. And the borders are there to create environment. So you have everything from the woodland environment to the dry, arid environment. And the idea is that these plants may occur in several of the borders or they may only occur in one. But if you come here and you study your plants and the different places in which they appear, you begin to get a portrait or a biography, Ruskin would say, of the plant.